Alright folks, today I'm going to try and show you a few different ways to make epoxy resin shakers. So some of the materials that you might need would be, of course, like a shaker mold. In this case I'm doing a bunch of horses. Really anything with like a cavity in it would work, so it doesn't have to be specifically marketed as a shaker mold, but there are plenty of them out there. Amazon, Etsy, Instagram, whatever. Same for little shaker bits. So these are tiny stars. This one I got off Amazon, has all kinds of different shapes. This one is like a retro video game theme that I got off Etsy. And then it makes, kind of like that. Possibly some little micro beads or micro balls. Different glitters. This is in like an Old Spice container, but it's kind of like a rainbow confetti. This I got at a craft store. It has hearts and stars and things. You could do confetti or glitter shapes. These are like holographic unicorns. The dollar store even has, these are like little hearts and little stars. You can buy like, they come in like a teeny tiny bags like this, 4 of them for $1. You might also want a needle and syringe, a hand drill or a pin vise. You can find these at the hardware store, craft stores will sell them, probably Amazon. This you can get like a medical supply store, maybe like a pharmacy, possibly Amazon, I'm not really sure. A friend of mine who works in the medical field gave me this. This is a pin pen, so it's just a pencil with like a sewing needle in it. I use it for weeding vinyl, but it will come in handy here. You'll want a pen or a marker, possibly an X-Acto knife or also a craft knife, yeah. Some kind of lighter. You could do like a barbecue lighter, or this is a butane cigarette lighter. I don't recommend the ones that like blow because it'll probably blow your epoxy all over, but this is good for popping bubbles. You'll want mineral oil or baby oil. You will possibly want UV resin. This is the kind that I have. I got it off Amazon. There's all kinds of different kinds. They pretty much all work the same. You put it on there, you stick it under a UV light. I have a little flashlight, or you can go stick it in the sun. I can't do that today because it's pouring rain, so there's that. I have this little squeeze bottle that I put my mineral oil in. I do have, let's see, right here, my doming mat. I have a little metal stir stick. I prefer metal over wood. It makes less bubbles for me. And of course you'll want epoxy. And I think, I have baby wipes. I use it to clean like my metal stir stick and things. It's just good for cleaning up epoxy if you drip or cleaning off your tools. And then you will want, this is, let's see if I can get it all the way in the camera. Acetate or transparency film. Let's see if I can get one out of here. These are like the old transparencies for overhead projectors. It's really, I don't even know if I can get on the camera. It's just a clear piece of plastic that you're going to use to cover up your cavity on your shaker mold. So, of course, you'll want to cast your shaker, whatever colors you want. I had an order for 5 of these, so I just started picking like random colors. So today is pink and white. And then you start taking your different fillers and you just start, whoops, not that much. Don't do that. Yeah. Put this back in there. So let's try this again. So you'll just want to put maybe a little bit in there. these guys in there. These tend to stick together, so I kind of like to smush them in my fingers a little bit before I toss them in there. And then let's go with maybe some silver beads in here. Hope they won't dump a whole bunch out. There we go. I always like to do these little stars and things. I'm going to throw a few of them in there. And maybe some hearts too. You can fill yours as much or as little as you like. Some shakers have designs like in the background, so you probably want to do a little less on those. I learned that one the hard way. I filled it up a bunch and then you couldn't even tell what it was anymore. I always like putting unicorns in my little horses. It's like unicorn on the outside, or unicorn on the inside, horse on the outside kind of thing. And then maybe like 1 or 2 of these little bits that I molded. Let's see. Toss these in as like a little surprise. So this one turns red in the sun and this one will glow in the dark. And we'll just toss them in there. And then after you have your shaker as filled up as you would like, you take your transparency and you would put it right on top. And then you can do a few different things. You can trace it with a pen or a marker. If you use a pen or a marker, you're going to want to trace more toward the outside of where you want to cut. And then of course you want to cut on the inside of that line so none of it shows. You could also take your X-Acto and give it a trace. Generally it won't cut all the way through, but it'll leave a little line for you to follow when you cut with your scissors. Pin pen is the same. I use it to like scratch a line around and then I cut on that line. I do already have one cut, so I'm gonna grab that. Okay, have my little cut out from my acetate here, and there's a few different ways you can attach it. You could use regular epoxy and just kind of put like a bead around, then you'll have to wait the 8, 12, 24 hours, however long it takes your epoxy to cure. You could do super glue, I've heard. I haven't tried it. My only concern would be super glue tends to make things foggy like glass, so I don't know if it does that with the plastic or not. The other way is with the UV resin, which is what I usually do. It's fast, it cures almost immediately, and it doesn't have any adverse reactions with the acetate. So I just take it and I run like a little bead around the opening, and super fast. I have a little toothpick here and I'm just going to make sure that it covers the whole thing. We don't want any gaps in here for our liquid to escape from. So just real quick, run my toothpick around, and then I'm going to take my arm out of the way here, my transparency, and I'm just going to plop it right on top. Take my little toothpick, kind of nudged into place, make sure it's covering the whole thing, and then I will take my UV flashlight and we'll just give it a cure for a minute. And I did forget, because I had done this prior and I got really excited to start, so I totally forgot. Two different ways to fill it. You can drill a hole. You can use, this is a pin vise, you could use a Dremel, you could use a regular electric drill, kind of whatever you have. And you just want to drill a hole, let's see, right in the side. I had already done that in preparation for this tutorial, so I totally forgot about it. You would want to do that before you fill it up with stuff because it does make a little, like, I don't know, epoxy curlicues, like when you drill it out. If you are not comfortable using hand tools, this is where the syringe would come in. At this point, after you've adhered the film, you can fill your syringe with baby oil or mineral oil. You would just pierce right through the film, fill it up, you know, as far as you can, and then you would take your UV resin, put just a tiny drop on the hole, cure it, and then it's all sealed up, and then we would be able to move on to the next step, which is doming the top of your shaker, which again, you can do a couple different ways. You could do UV resin, just you know, fill it up, cure it. That might actually be easier on designs like this where it's more complicated, but apparently I'm a glutton for punishment, so I always do my epoxy resin. So I just kind of pile it up on here. I do a couple of these little scoops, and then I start pushing it around. I'll push it up to the point of the ear, and I'll come out on each one of these little parts for the mane. And my epoxy has been sitting for a little bit, so it's a little bit thicker, which makes it easier to do your doming. It's not as likely to run off the end. It kind of wants to stay where you put it. I know this is not super exciting to watch, so maybe we'll speed this up a little bit. You just want to make sure that you get the whole thing. You want to cover your entire piece so there are no gaps. It has a nice even coating. This also helps hide the edges of the transparency so that it's a little less obvious how you put it together. Probably really should have done this on my doming mat. Let's see if I can move it without making a huge mess. Oh, see, and I dribbled a little bit, and that's okay. So you'll want to kind of peek at it at different angles, make sure that's all even, that you've covered it all the way, it goes all the way to the edges, make sure it's not pulling away anywhere, and then that's when I take my butane lighter and I just run it real fast over the top to make sure that there's no bubbles. And that's it for that. And then you would set it aside to let it cure. If you've used epoxy resin, if you used UV resin, you are ready to go on to the next step. Switch this out for a clean one. So the next step would be, let's see, this is where we are now. So we would have our shaker. It has been domed over. It's totally sealed. I have my little hole drilled right here. If you've done the syringe, you can skip this step because your shaker would already be filled and ready to go. This would be if you drilled a hole in the side. So I like the little squeeze bottle. You could also use the syringe to fill through the little hole if that is your preference. I just happen to like the little squeeze bottles. So, okay, so we're gonna go ahead and fill our shaker with oil. So I just take my little squeeze bottle and I put it in the hole that I drilled. And I just fill it up. Swing this around so that I can look at it, so I can try and get as small of a bubble as possible. I'm not the greatest at getting no bubbles yet, but you know, we're working on it. Okay, so I'm just gonna make sure that my little hole that I drilled at the top is pretty clean. And I'm going to take my UV resin again. And I'm just gonna put a little drop on top. And take my flashlight and give it a cure. Having not enough to having too much. So we'll just give this a cure. It only takes like a minute or two with a flashlight. It takes almost no time at all if you do it in the sun. And the fun part is a lot of my glitters in here are like blacklight reactive. All right, and then no matter which method you use, at this point you could be done. There are a couple optional steps that you could take at this point. You could grab my basket here. You could add some hardware to it. Turn it into a keychain. I just got those on Amazon. If you wanted, you could do one of these little eye hooks. Just screw it in there. You could start a hole with your hand drill. You could just, I mean, eventually if you work hard enough, you can screw that little eye screw in, and then you could attach your hardware. Okay, and then the alternative to the eye screw would be a bezel. You can buy these at craft stores, Amazon, whatever. So it just has a little flat piece with a loop so that you can attach things to it. You could attach a jewelry, like a necklace, keychain hardware again, kind of whatever you want to do with it. So I would just usually glue that right on the back. I like E6000. You can use whatever glue. And then the other optional thing that you could do is to dome the back. So once the front is all dry, you've filled it up, you can also dome the back. I like to do it. I feel like it gives it a more finished look, because sometimes you get like the little lip from the mold on the back. And then it also encases. I like to do these bezels so it encases it in there so it has less of a chance of popping off. Once you have domed the back, you can do that with the UV resin. You could do that with regular epoxy resin. So once that is cured, however long that takes, then you are good to go, and you will have your shaker. Let's see if we can get this. So we'll see if we can get the stuff moving around in there. And then that's it. You were all done. You will, if you use epoxy resin, I only mixed up 5 mLs. You use hardly any at all. So I tend to do either a bunch of them at the same time, or you can take your extra and you can start filling up your little shaker bits molds. You can either, you know, put a tiny bit of glitter in there, put it in your epoxy. You can do micas, alcohol inks, kind of whatever you want to do, so that you have extra little bits for the next time. So that is it. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask in the comments below. And thanks so much for watching.